and our treasured viewers. You are welcome to today's lesson. You will recall that the last time our discussion dwelt on the parts of speech. We were able to make an outline of the 7 parts of speech and pointed out that the interjection, what used to be the 8th part of speech, ceased to be a part of speech in English language from the year 2000. And the reason was that a part of speech performs a grammatical function. Until that year, it was discovered that the interjection had no grammatical relationship with the other words that is often found along with in a sentence. Today, we are still talking about parts of speech, but our discussion will center on uncountable and countable nouns. Uncountable nouns are the major groups of nouns in English language. They are the largest group of nouns under which the other noun classes are subdivided. Let us talk about the more easier of the two, and that is the countable nouns. Of course, when we say a noun is countable, we mean it's a count noun. It's a measurable noun. Any noun that can be measured in absolute units is countable. Now, using a layperson's parlance, we would say that if a noun exists in separate parts that can be counted, then such a noun qualifies to be called countable. Countable nouns are marked by their singularity and plurality. In other words, it is a feature of a countable noun that it has both singular and plural forms. In other words, it can rise from a singular form to a plural form. It is usually convenient to subdivide a countable noun between the concrete countable and the abstract countable. Let's take a look at this. The concrete countable nouns are names of things that exist in a physical form. You may say in a solid form. Things that have shape, things that we can touch because they are tangible enough to be handled. Let us take a few examples to illustrate. Car. Person. Book. Lorry. Park. House. Horse. Horse. Window. Bucket. Car, among others. There are obviously so many examples that one can give, but which time will not allow us to do here. The most important thing is that I am aware that you out there have as many examples of countable nouns or concrete countable nouns as I have. Now, these are examples of the countable nouns that we call concrete. Each of them exists in a physical form, and each can rise from one to more than one. So we can have car and cars, we can talk about person and persons, book and books, and so on and so forth. Now, let us take a look at the abstract countable. In other words, a noun that is countable can also exist in an abstract form. What does abstraction mean here? When we talk about abstract, we mean existing in the imagination. Existing in what? In the imagination. An abstract noun is the name of something that we all know, but which does not exist in a physical form. In other words, we cannot see the noun. We generally cannot feel the noun, but we can imagine it. Now, some of them are also countable. An example is reason. We know what reason is. What was the reason behind her action? We know what a reason is when someone talks about reason, but no one has ever seen reason physically. The plural of reason is reasons. Take a look at the noun system. A system exists in our imagination. It refers to an arrangement that permits the functioning of a set of devices. An arrangement that makes the functioning of a group of people or a set of ideas qualifies to be called a system. For instance, there is an educational system that includes teachers, curriculum, scheme of work, and so on and so forth. It is an educational system. So system is also countable. The plural of system is systems. The noun difficulty is an abstract noun. The plural is difficulties. Take a look at the noun problem. Problem is also a countable noun. Either you have a problem or you have problems. Good. Another one is method. An arrangement for doing something. Method. Style. Arrangement. Selection. Attitude. Obstruction. Attraction, among others. Each of these is an abstract noun. It is a noun that we know about. They are names of things that we often talk about and that we understand when people refer to them, but which do not exist in any physical form. We can only imagine them when someone talks about them. Now these are all examples of countable nouns. They exist both in a concrete form, concrete countables, and then in an abstract form, abstract countables. The countable noun doesn't give us much of a problem. As early as our days in the elementary or primary schools, we were taught that if a noun grows from one to more than one, what we call the singular form and the plural form, that the letter S, known as the plural marker, indicates that a growth has occurred in the noun. So what we do most often is simply to add S to the singular noun to make it plural. Of course, we are aware that there are other nouns that do not follow this rule. There are nouns that are countable and make their plural forms in ways different from simply adding the letter S. But let us take a look at the sentences we have here. Now, in this example, we say, Mr. Aldo has bought a brand new car. This is car used in its singular form. A noun will have Mr. Audu has bought some brand new cars, and so the noun car becomes plural number in the next sentence, illustrating how the countable nouns are to be used. A second example might make it better understood. Now, if someone says, the sailors encountered a difficulty. The sailors encountered a difficulty while crossing the Atlantic. The sailors encountered some difficulty while crossing the Atlantic. Now let's take a look at this. The sailors encountered some, so A, the article A becomes some, encountered some difficulties while crossing the Atlantic. Convert the singular form of difficulty to its plural form, difficulties. The sailors encountered some difficulties while crossing the Atlantic. Now, these are more some examples of countable and uncountable nouns that you need to get familiar with. In a more expanded discussion, we will talk about what we generally refer to as quantifiers, where we learn how to use countable nouns with adjectival words that enable us to measure the quantities of nouns that we make sentences with. But for now, let us take a look at the uncountable nouns. You bear in mind that what we are doing is an overview of these two groups of nouns, so that we will have enough chance to also visit the other subdivisions of countable and uncountable nouns in subsequent discussion. So we are not giving it the detailed treatment that is required today. We will still go back to countable and uncountable nouns some other time. But let us talk about the concrete uncountable noun. The concrete uncountable nouns. That is, nouns that are uncountable, but they are concrete. Let's take examples like glass and grass, wood and gold, sand and rice, food and salt, sugar and detergent, meat and water, beans and glue, chicken and yam, among others. The example could be inexhaustive if we continue. Now, these are concrete uncountable. That is, nouns that are uncountable, and they are also in physical form. They exist in physical form. Let us take examples and see whether there are also uncountable nouns that are abstract. So think about abstract, uncountable nouns. Take a look at the word convenience. Inconvenience, a word that means the state of being easy, the convenience with which a given task is discharged. News, a very popular abstract uncountable noun. Advice, information, work, damage, evidence, form, the form in which something appears. Form, shade, which, among others. Now, these nouns are uncountable. And as we can see, there are concrete uncountable nouns and then abstract uncountable nouns. But there's something I want to help you understand generally about uncountable nouns before we go on. The uncountable nouns are the most difficult set of nouns in the English language to use. In fact, people never get perfect in making use of uncountable nouns. The reason is because there are many nouns that go by the name uncountable. They are said to be uncountable, and yet you see them having the plural marker S. Because basically, if a noun is uncountable, the implication is that it doesn't grow beyond 1. It remains steady. The number doesn't grow. So it cannot get from 1 to more than 1. It appears to remain where it is. So tea is uncountable, water is uncountable, coffee is uncountable, sugar is uncountable, glue is uncountable. That means we can't say teas, we can't say coffees, we can't say waters, we can't say glues. But in fact, this is not the case. It is also correct to say teas, and glues, and waters, and coffees, and so on and so forth. So why is this so? The reason is this. Many nouns are countable because of their meaning. And nouns often have multiple meanings. So one meaning of a noun may be countable, while another meaning is uncountable. I'll give you an example. The word property is an uncountable noun. When we say in an English sentence, the man and his family travel with all their property, it becomes incorrect to say travel with all their properties. When we say property, we refer to people's personal belongings. People's personal belongings. Everything you have in your house make up your property, but not properties. That meaning of property is uncountable. But property has a new meaning, a different meaning. Property can mean real estate. If property means real estate, then it means the business of buying and selling land and buildings. So one piece of land is a property, another piece of land somewhere is a property. Someone owns this property, or maybe owns the other property also. If you add one property to another property, they become properties, plural. So property becomes countable if it means real estate. But if it means people's personal belongings, it is an uncountable noun. That is what applies to nouns like form, that obviously have plurals like forms. Shade, that has a plural shades. Wish, that has a plural wishes. Now, if someone tells you, please, do you have another tea? I bought 2 teas from the market. The person means types of or kinds of. Another tea means a different kind from the one you had already. So if I say I bought 2 teas or 3 teas in the market, I mean that either I bought Lipton, a kind of tea, Bonvita, a kind of tea, Ovaltine, a kind of tea, Top tea, a kind of tea. 4 kinds. It is these 4 kinds that I would refer to as teas. But assume I am taking Lipton, I can only ask for more of it, but not another tea. Assume I need to take more than what I have in my cup. I will ask the stewardess, for instance, or steward, please, can you serve me more tea? Meaning, more of the same that I am taking. It cannot be teas this time around. But once I say, can you serve me another tea? I mean a different one from the one I am taking. Then later on I can now say, I drank 2 teas. Meaning I took Lipton and coffee, or I took Lipton and Ovaltine, as the case may be. I hope we are making sense. So in this way, which is countable in one sense, but uncountable in another. Shade the something and then form the same. So let us continue now that we have seen the general nature of uncountable nouns. If a noun is uncountable, you don't add an S, the plural marker, to it to make it plural because it doesn't have a plural number. So we can make a sentence such as Mr. Sykes family consume a lot of meat. Correct. But we not say meats. A lot of tells us the amount they consume. But it must be a lot of meat. Or we can say Mr. Sykes' family consumes much meat, but not many meats. That's not possible. And it cannot be meats. Alright? We can also use what we call additives, words that are used to measure the quantity of that which is uncountable. We can say, for instance, 25 kilos of meat. 25 kilos of meat can barely be enough to serve the guest. 25 kilos of meat can barely be enough to serve the guest. Meat is still meat. We cannot say meat because it's uncountable. But kilos gives us an idea of the number, of the quantity involved. Now let us take number 2. Sandra ate much bread. That's why she's having constipation. Sandra ate much bread. The uncountable noun is bread. Sandra ate much bread. That's why she's having constipation. Now, if it is not necessary to talk about the quantity eaten, then you just use the noun that way. So we can say Sandra ate bread if the quantity consumed is not necessary. And when we talk about quantities, we mean the amount of when we're talking about uncountable nouns. The lawn has dark green grass. The lawn has dark green grass. of glass, shards of glass, littered the scene of the collapsed building. Now this sentence uses the uncountable noun news. It says, the students did well in the examination. This is good news. It is necessary to point out here that news is one uncountable noun that people commit errors in the use of almost more than any other one. It's necessary that I point out that you avoid using a with news. A noun that is uncountable cannot be used with a number of quantifiers. A, and, another, several, many, every are some of the quantifiers. Quantifiers are words that indicate number. These are some quantifiers that can be used with a noun if the noun is uncountable. So no one can talk about a news. You can't talk about another news. You can't talk about several news. News is just news. If it is good news, say it's good news. If it is ugly news, say it is ugly news. If it is heartbreaking news, say it is heartbreaking news. You can use any of such adjectives to qualify news, but you cannot add a. You can't say it is a heartbreaking news. Simply say it is heartbreaking news. Good. If you do not say it is good news, you may write or say something like, news has arrived to us from the scene of the air crash. From the scene of the air crash, news has arrived, or that not a news has arrived to us. News has arrived to us. You say, for instance, there is little news. There is little news on rabbits rearing. There is little news on rabbit rearing on the internet. There is little news on rabbit rearing on the internet. All right. We will just take one more example before we draw our curtain today. Now, you must remember, like I pointed out earlier, that it is necessary only when the amount of noun involved is needed to use a qualifier like much. For instance, here we have the flood caused much damage to crops and homes. We don't talk about damages in English, where damage means injury or pain or harm caused to a person or to a person's property. It's an uncountable noun. So we don't say damage, we say much damage. If you do not want to say much damage or the amount involved is not necessary, then you may simply say the flood caused damage to crops and homes. Today, our discussion has been on the nature of nouns that are countable and those nouns that are uncountable. We haven't said much beyond introducing these nouns and pointing out that each can have the concrete and abstract components, and then to make a few sentences to illustrate how they are to be used correctly in English language. In our subsequent classes, once we have visited the other kinds of nouns, we'll always go back and have a more detailed treatment of countable nouns and uncountable nouns. Please be free to ask questions. Dropping your question on the comment area. And do not forget, please, to like this video so that we'll be able to produce more of these kinds for your enjoyment and then educational edification in the future. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Bye-bye.